Good evening, everyone. I'm going to do a talk this evening on the recovery of innocence, which a lot of them, again, it's one of those talks, a lot of points that I've used before will be used again to clarify them. So its point is to live in a spiritual life. The world we live in is very complex. We have made it that way by feeding our intellectual minds and moving away from simplicity and innocence. Even nature is dissected and classified in the mad rush to fill the mind and shut out the light of the spirit. The voice of the silence, translated by H.P. Blavatsky, tells us that the mind is a great slayer of the real, like the disciples slay the slayer. This means that we have to kill out the mind's identification with those things that prevent its flowering. It doesn't mean that we have to abandon the world and go and live in a cave somewhere, unless we feel that is necessary for us at our stage of development. But it means that we should not be caught up in material thoughts and actions so that we become bound by them. Many people confuse abandonment to the dictates of the desires and needs of the material self to freedom, such as the idea of free love in the hippie days, or doing your own thing, or living a hedonistic lifestyle, as many younger people do nowadays, based upon this idea of YOLO, Y-O-L-O, you only live once, thinking because you only live once, you have to cram as much experience as you can into one life. But all these things merely increase the hold of the lower part of our nature and forges new mental chains that keep us bound in the dungeons of our own desires. It's like Plato's cave, where people were chained and bound so they could only see the wall and the shadows created by the fire behind them. They took these shadows for realities, as we take transitory emotions, thoughts and desires to be our true self. If these chains are removed from the cave dwellers, they may turn around and find out what is the truth eventually. But it may have to be revealed to them gradually, as too long an exposure to darkness would make a plunge into sudden light, blinding to them and confusing. In theosophical teaching, there's a difference between the personality and the individuality. The personality is those temporary thoughts, feelings, and desires mentioned. It is the part we play on the stage of life, whereas the individuality can be likened in one way to the actor who leaves the stage and goes home after the performance as himself or herself. In the East, the individuality is referred to as the Sutratma, or the thread soul, because it is like a golden thread that runs through our lives, which are threaded on it like pearls. The individuality, then, is that dimension to our being that is always aware of itself, despite the changes of outer garb. Did not Shakespeare say that the world is a stage and that we are actors on it and have our own entrances and exits? But if we go deep within our being, we can see that we do not change, and that even when we are 80 or older, we are no different than 18, unless we are so material we identify too much with physical change and take the outer shell as our true self. Mahayana Buddhism calls this individuality the true man or the true woman. It also says that the battleground is in the mind, as does the Bhagavad Gita and other spiritual teachings. The mind is either dragged down towards an involvement with materialistic ideas, or it becomes illumined by the light of the spirit, which in the East is called Manasa Tajasa, which I've mentioned a few times, and this means the illumined mind. So this process of illumination is what could be referred to as the recovery of innocence. The Bhagavad Gita and Sufi teaching recommend that we focus our attention solely on what they sometimes call God or the divine. The idea behind this is that the mind is dragged here and there like a rudderless boat on a stormy sea in the so-called normal course of our lives. It is pulled and shoved about, and we have little control over it. The purity and innocence of the mind we have at birth is soon polluted by indoctrination on all sides and is not encouraged to grow naturally as a flower does. We are told that amassing material goods is conducive to happiness, but in fact it can cause great misery. The Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu tells us that by making certain things in life seem desirable, then we are creating a society which the have-nots will take forcibly from the haves, believing that the possession of a nice car, etc., will make them somehow more acceptable and truly human. Well, that may be true according to the shallow values of a material society, but not in reality. Happiness created by material things is transitory. And it's a bit like taking drugs. You want something, and you get bored with that, so you want something else, and you want something else, and it goes on forever. So the idea of focusing on the divine is to calm the mind in the contemplation of one object, so that it becomes centered. If the whole of humanity had this one object for the mind to become illumined by the light of the divine, then we would all become brothers and sisters involved in the same quest. We would all follow the way in our own individual manner, but we would all be going to the same place, if you can call it a place. And the Voice of the Secret Doctrine by H.P. Blavatsky says that we should proceed by self-induced and self-devised efforts. In the Lotus Sutra, which is a Buddhist scripture, Gautama Buddha says that he is now ready to reveal the highest truth. Formerly, there were three distinct groups of practitioners of Buddhism: Shravakas, which means listeners or students; Pratyeka Buddhas, who seek enlightenment for themselves alone; and Bodhisattvas, who work for the enlightenment of humanity. There were also the Mahayana, or great vehicle, and the Hinayana, or small vehicle. But now, he says that all these paths were preparatory for the teaching of the one vehicle, or Ekayana. This teaching tells us that we all have the Buddha nature, and even the worst person will one day become a Buddha, even if it takes millenniums, or millions of years maybe. This is exemplified in the story of the Bodhisattva Never Despise, who I think I've made a talk about him recently. I've mentioned him quite a few times. Who lived in a time long ago when the teachings of the Buddha was in decline, and even monks and nuns were living dissolute lives. Amidst all this, the Bodhisattva Never Despise, who was said to be a former incarnation of Gautama Buddha, taught the Lotus Sutra and proclaimed that all of those who mocked him and physically abused him would all be Buddhas one day, so he could never hate or condemn them. It was a very similar teaching to Theosophy, except it was more restricted to Buddhism. Theosophy is more universal in its views, but still teaches that we are all divine inwardly, no matter what our external environment and lifestyle. A beggar on the streets may be more white-souled than a king or a priest. The passing shadow that is our personal self is no indication of the true man or the true woman within. So we all share the same spirit. How do we find our way to the spiritual and dissolve the illusions that we dwell in separation from each other? I've also mentioned the Zen teacher Bankei, so just a recap of some things he said. The Zen teacher Bankei had a novel way of getting this across. He taught that we have the unborn Buddha mind always, and that we just have to awaken to this fact. He said, when I am lecturing, he said, if a crow calls outside, or a sparrow chirps, or people pass by talking outside, you are aware of all this without having to think of it. You know if it is a sparrow or a crow, or if it is a man or a woman or a child, without having to consciously think of it. Bankhe says that this is the true unborn Buddha mind that you have at birth, managing everything as it should be. It is only that as we grew, we exchanged this mind for other minds that were artificial, minds of greed, lust, anger, and jealousy, etc., which were foisted on us by society. If we return to our natural mind, everything will be perfectly managed. So when we feel the urge to become angry, etc., we should think, I must not exchange my unborn Buddha mind for a mind of anger, and remain what we all are, naturally. So it all boils down to becoming natural. If we are natural, then we fit neatly into nature and follow nature's course, as much a part of nature's unfolding as a tree. Spirituality is nothing about being weird or following way out philosophies or religions or New Age ideas or even theosophy dogmatically. It's just about becoming sane, recovering what we never really lost, paradoxically. In the Bible, it says that we must become as little children to enter the kingdom of heaven. And in the voice of the silence, it tells us that the pupil must regain the child state he or she has lost before the first sound can fall upon the inner ear. We won't hear anything so long as we are immersed in the din of the material world and our own minds. We have to find that place of silence in which we always dwell, despite our outer conditions. We are always in the unborn Buddha mind, despite our outer conditions. We are always in the unborn Buddha mind, or the Tao, or the Christ consciousness, or Krishna consciousness, or Allah, or God, or the divine, or whatever name you want to use, or none at all, which is probably the best. In essence, it is all the same. The reality has been given a name because our minds cannot grasp what is ungraspable. We can only become it and find out that words and thoughts cannot encompass it. Not even the word it is sufficient. I think the mystics, poets, artists, and musicians have best captured this innocence over the centuries and have kept the spirit of beauty and mystery in their hearts and souls. Whereas many others have analysed and intellectualised the teachings for the sake of those with less sensitive natures. There's a difference between admiring the beauty of a flower and dissecting it to find out what all the different parts are. There's one class of people who prefer just to accept the flower as a manifestation of beauty. Beauty in its separate forms is transitory, but beauty in essence is eternal. The beauty we see in a flower or sunset, or hear or smell or taste, or the beauty we see or hear in another, or that we discern in music or literature or art or in spiritual being, it is all the same beauty manifesting in countless ways. As we live in an illusion of separateness, we also live under the delusion that there are many different beauties. But in fact, there is only one. So even though a flower or butterfly may live only days or hours, the beauty it embodies is eternal. As the Neoplatonic philosopher Plotinus said, we can use this external beauty as a ladder to ascend in contemplation to the eternal beauty. We also think our minds are separate, but they are all manifestations of the universal mind that permeates everything. Our minds have the potential to become universal, like a calm and boundless ocean, stretching out into shoreless space. Of course, what many people call beauty isn't really beauty. Beauty is something that the soul recognizes. So we can see people may say, oh, this is a beautiful car or a beautiful, but that is a different kind of beauty. It's a beauty based on materialistic ideas, the lower aspects of beauty. If we're to use beauty as a ladder to ascend to the divine, we have to get deeper and deeper into the natural beauty beauty of nature, the beauty of wonderful poetry, art, music, etc. In the same way, we come to see that all those people regard as separate from us are actually all on the same journey at different stages. We are all on this earth for the same purpose, to awaken from the dream and realize who or what we really are. So someone we may regard as below us, may in the next life overtake us spiritually, because in this life they are learning certain lessons that will help them to move forward. So we can't really or shouldn't really judge anyone. Inwardly, we are one. And just as the beauty in something can be traced back through physical beauty, through intellectual beauty, through soul beauty, to the one beauty, so we can go beyond the physical appearance of someone, back to the one spirit. That is the essence of us all. The life in us is no different from the life in all things. And this realization is the only basis for true brotherhood. We have built our whole society on the basis of separateness and the pampering of the personal self, on the ideas of look after number one, etc. From the seed of selfishness has grown all the strifes and wars and suffering in the world. H.P. Blavatsky said that we should not think of self-culture, but mutual culture. I think this selfish culture is very much showing its true side now in the soaring cases of muggings and robberies and violence for violence sake, and wars and many other things, and in competitiveness, all of which divides society into successes and failures and creates jealousy and bitterness. There's not much talk of mutual culture. But to be fair, many individuals and groups are trying their best to work towards a brotherhood and a sisterhood of humanity. The Theosophical movement has always been in the forefront as regards promoting a universal brotherhood of humanity, regardless of race, creed, sex, caste, or colour, based upon the spiritual oneness of all sentient beings. We are animated by the same spirit if we are Muslims, Buddhists, Christians, Hindus, atheists, agnostics, pagans, theosophists, or whatever, or the ones who are true to their religion, not the fanatical ones, the fundamentalists, etc. Because the essence of all religions is the same. This is what theosophy teaches. There's no religion higher than truth, is our motto. Religions and philosophies are mere ephemera of the world's day, though theosophy teaches that just divine truth is eternal and is at the base of them all. There's only one truth, of course. We have to take it that there are those on earth who know it, and that there's a way to find those people and learn at least some relative truths that are pointers to reality. Again, that was one of the purposes of the Theosophical Society and the Theosophical movement coming into being. I take very much to Bankir's idea that we always live in the unborn Buddha mind, and that our task is to remain Buddha rather than become it. Buddha means enlightened. It doesn't refer to any real individual or purpose. It is a state of being that is the same goal of every true spiritual quester. So to recap a bit, pulling all the threads together, we are naturally innocent beings. Unnatural states of mind have been forced on us as we grew. We live in an intensely materialistic society, and for the most part, we are all children of our age. Plato said that all real learning is recollection. It is as if we have drunk of the waters of the river Lethe and forgotten who or what we really are. The process is one of awakening from the dream and remembering that we are spiritual beings. The golden verses of Pythagoras tell us to take heart, for the race of man is divine. And again, I've done a talk on that. So we must never despair of the human race, but like the Bodhisattva never despise, try to see the good in everyone. And if we can't see it, try to understand that it is there somewhere deep within, and that we are all more or less children of our age, as said. There's a real being, the true man or woman, who lives in a perpetual state of innocence. This is the part of us that persists and bridges the gap between so-called life and death. But in fact, there is only the ever-living. It is what gives us a sense of our identity. It is in the end just one more illusion amongst all others. But during this journey from greater to lesser illusions, it is our guiding light until we get to a point where we transcend all illusions and see truth face to face, for want of a better expression. Or we see our original face, as the Zen teachers say. But of course, we don't see with our physical eyes. Sight has 7 levels, as does hearing, touch, smell, and taste. In this world, we only experience the lowest level usually. So we have to ascend through the ladder of seeing to the deepest level. Another thing to remember is that what we are physically is not necessarily what we are spiritually. We may be outwardly ordinary people living humdrum lives, but inwardly we may be shining our light on others and dispelling their nightmares and fears. This will probably be due to efforts in a previous life or to things set in motion in this life that act on our inner selves. Alternatively, people who are very active and seemingly successful in this life may be barren spiritually and seemingly successful in material things, but not successful in spiritual things. What they bring to society may be negligible or even harmful. She said that in the Bhagavad Gita that what is day to the wise man is night to the man of the world, and what is night to the wise man is day to the man of the world. She also said that we must find action in inaction and inaction in action. Efforts on the mental plane are 10 times more effective than actions on the physical, as actions on the spiritual plane are countless times more effective than actions on the mental. In the Diamond Sutra, Gautama Buddha says to his disciple Subhuti that if one offered precious gems equivalent to all the grains of sand in the river Ganges to the Buddhas and all sentient beings, it would not be worth a fraction of just learning 4 lines of the Diamond Sutra and teaching it to others. This is because physical wealth is nothing compared to the spiritual. Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, said the same thing when he told us not to store our treasure on earth, where the moth and rust corrupt and thieves can break in, but store up our treasures in heaven, where moth and rust can't corrupt and thieves can't break in. This, of course, means make sure that your treasures are of a spiritual kind, which are beyond the workings of the things of the world, which have to follow the processes of birth, maturity, old age, and death, whether it be a living thing or a so-called inanimate object, like a washing machine even. Everything follows that process, even a planet or a universe over billions and trillions of years. But the spiritual is beyond change, and that is where we should store our treasures if we would find immortality. So we come from a state of innocence, unconscious immortality, we may call it, to become in time to be conscious of our mortality. Then eventually, through many trials in this vale of tears, we become aware of our immortality and we become consciously immortal. And then beyond that, to return to innocence again, but with the richness of our experiences added. So that although it may to our limited minds seem the same as where we started, we've indeed reached a higher level, like a spiral, which is beyond the realms of speculation. And we go to a state which is beyond any kind of mental cognition or thought. So what we become has no name. One of my favourite sayings, which you've probably heard many times, is, take courage, for the race of man is divine, by Pythagoras. As I said earlier, when mentioning the Bodhisattva never despised, the key is to look upon our fellow human beings as divine and to love them as students of one spiritual teacher and sons and daughters of one divine mother. This is not easy, which is beautifully illustrated by this Zen tale about a farmer who asked a Buddhist priest to recite a sutra, which is a Buddhist spiritual teaching, for his wife who had just died. He asked the priest if the sutra would really help his wife. The priest replied that it would not only help his wife, but all sentient beings. The farmer thought and said that his wife may be very weak and others may take the benefits from her. So could the priest recite the sutra just for her? To this, the priest replied that the sutras were for the blessing and merit of all sentient beings. That is a fine teacher, concluded the farmer, but please make one exception. I have a neighbour who is rough and mean to me. Just exclude him from all those sentient beings. So, of course, we can't exclude anyone, though we may feel like doing at times. But we mustn't swap our natural unborn Buddha mind for one of anger, jealousy, and greed. We have to learn to cast no one out of our mind. The sun shines for everyone, despite what they have done, said, or done, and it illumines the lives of the evil as well as the good. How then shall we react or act towards our fellow human beings? The voice of the silence gives us these pointers, really aimed at those committed to the path. It says, let thy soul lend its ear to every cry of pain, like as the lotus bears its heart to drink the morning sun. Let not the fierce sun dry one tear of pain before thyself has wiped it from the sufferer's eye. But let each burning human tear drop on thy heart, and there remain, nor ever brush it off until the pain that caused it is removed. We in time learn that others are really ourselves. We are all one. We will begin to realize that no real enlightenment is possible until all beings are enlightened. So we must try to regard others as the disciples of one teacher, sons and daughters of one sweet mother, as said, and try to protect and nurture them as we would protect our own eyes. Once we realize that we are spiritual beings, we will look upon life differently. We'll have a love and respect for nature, and all our plans will take nature into consideration. When we build dwellings and towns, we'll think of a way to construct, causing the least damage to nature, instead of destroying thousands of acres of countryside to build motorways or runways that decimate land that has been untouched for thousands of years. We'll cease to be thoughtless, as our souls will unite with the soul of all things, the universal soul, and we will see all sentient beings as our brothers and sisters and treat everyone with respect. We'll develop the innocence of Miranda, the magician Prospero's daughter in Shakespeare's play The Tempest. When she saw many people gathered together for the first time, she said, "Oh, wonder, how many goodly creatures are there here? How beauteous mankind is! Oh, brave new world that has such people in it." So in her innocence, she saw the people of the world without any guile, without any prejudices or preconceptions or self-seeking motive. When we return to innocence, we will also see the world anew, as Miranda saw it. Let us hope that day comes soon for us all. Thank you very much. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. Peace on earth and goodwill to all beings. And see you soon.